So it's 11 o'clock here on the East Coast. I think we should get started. I know Steve and Kay have a lot to cover.
Coffee. Keep
Get
me
your
awake.
coffee?
Keep me awake during this interview.
All right. Good morning, everyone, or early morning if you're on the West Coast with the Millers over there. Welcome to this month's IMTS webinar. We are so excited to have Kay on today. You know, we always get to see Steve and Kay's behind the scenes, but today Kay is our star of the webinar. I hope everyone's ready to hear from the Muffler Mama, as we refer to her. Oh, Steve, don't be upset. We love you too. We don't have a lot of updates here at AMT and IMTS. So we all just got back from MFG. It was wonderful down in Amelia Island. We had some great weather and got a lot of networking and excitement done down there. So if you weren't there, think about joining us next year. Location TBD at this point, but it will be around the same time frame. And, you know, we're still working on our podcast. Keep waiting with bated breath on those. We're getting going. We're getting them recorded and finished, and hopefully we'll be releasing them soon. So,
like the cat who ate the cheese and waited outside the mouse hole with bated breath.
I know.
You're going to make me talk.
But that's all from me. So without further ado, I'll give you over to Steve.
Yay. Thanks, Jean. Great to see you. And boy, thank you everybody for signing up today. I got to tell you, this is actually pretty darn exciting because, like Jean said, yes, you're so used to seeing me all the time, and actually all these years that you've been watching me, there's been this person behind the scenes, or kind of behind me, you know, kicking me in the butt to make sure that I'm out there doing the right job and taking care of everything and stuff. And I thought, you know, with her background, because Kay is in fact a world-class salesperson. If you remember, I also interviewed a buddy of mine. I don't think it was last year. I think it was the year before that a buddy of mine who was also in sales, who coincidentally his name is Kelly, and she and
Very confusing.
yeah, but the two of them often swap stories and stuff like that. So with that, let me introduce. I'm not going to read this bio that she wrote up because, you know, she's trying to be funny in here. But but the background is basically that Kay, my smoking hot wife Kay, went to Washington State University. She graduated, just says graduated from Washington State University. She graduated summa cum laude from Washington State. And shortly after she got out of Washington State, she became the very first woman to be hired to be on the sales force for a company called Amarok, which was Amarok Hardware, kitchen hardware, that type of stuff, kitchen bath hardware, which was a division of Anchor Hocking at the time. And she covered Washington, state of Washington. I do have to see some of this stuff. Washington, Oregon, parts of Idaho, and she ended up becoming a very top salesperson for them. That was when we met, and you know, we met back in like 1986, and then after we started dating and got married and stuff, she because of her success at Amarok, a recruiter then contacted her about interviewing for a job with Walker Automotive, a division of Tenneco, and Walker was the largest manufacturer of aftermarket mufflers, pipes, catalytic converters. And at the time, they had a sales team of over 150 people, of which I think, as she says, she only thinks there were maybe 3 or 4 women that were with the company. She covered Washington State, and you know, we're going to get into all that stuff because she ended up just before she left to start a family with somebody. she was named their top salesperson for the largest muffler manufacturer in the world. She was named the #1 muffler salesperson in the world at that time. We'll get into what she did after that as we get into the conversation and stuff like that. But I think I need to let her start talking here. So hello, Smoking Hot Wife Kay. How are you? And welcome to.
Thank you.
Welcome to an IMTS webinar. How are you doing?
Thank you. I'm excited. I am excited. I hear your voice talking on all these all the time, and so it's fun to be one of the interviewees. And so I should probably say that the Muffler Mama moniker came from, of course, Steve Miller. That was a good nickname, actually, and he used to say that I could bend pipes with the best of them.
That's right, bend pipe. That's right.
And
yeah. You know, and you know, there's a great story behind that bending pipe thing and welding and that type of stuff. But you know, help us to understand a little bit. You went to Washington State, worked with Amerock. Tell us what was Amerock?
So Amerock is builders cabinet hardware. So yes, I at the time sold to Ace Hardwares and True Values and a lot of independent hardware stores and some distributors. I covered a huge area, did a lot of driving, stayed in a lot of super fancy hotels like Motel 6 and travel lodges.
Yep.
And I think the room rate I usually paid was about $24.95 or so.
Yep.
That's how long ago it was. So, you know, it wasn't a glamorous job, but I really did enjoy it because, like all sales, you know, you're dealing with people, and if you love people, which I do, you know, it's a fun job. So I really enjoyed that, and it was really a good springboard for Walker.
Okay, yeah, and so, and I should remind everybody, you know, that #1, you can ask questions down in the chat. It's great. I see everybody kind of chatting with each other. Terrific. That's what it's for. And also, if you have any questions for Kay during the program, be sure to stick them in there at the bottom. If I don't get to them during the program, then I will definitely get to them at the end. And if you hear a loud squeak occasionally, that's not me. It's the dog playing with his squeaky ball and whining. So you were Amerock. You had success at Amerock, and you know, let's just start off right away with working in a male-dominated industry, because clearly that's what that was.
Right.
And you know, and then you transitioned from there to Walker, which was also a male-dominated industry. So let's get that you know, 800-pound gorilla out of there right away. Was #1. Why would you do that? Why would you go take on the challenge?
Okay, well, at first, when I graduated from college in 1982, the job market was really tough. So through, you know, I had originally thought, oh, I want to, you know, work for Procter & Gamble, or, you know, I want to sell pharmaceuticals or something. The job market was super tough, so I had some people that were manufacturers reps, and they gave me some experience and let me help them out so that I could get some sales experience. So through that, I ended up with Amerock because of some connections. And then because I was the very first woman that Amerock ever hired, I think that's what made me so attractive to Walker, because they were looking for women. They wanted to hire women. And so I was a known commodity in that from that point, because I'd already succeeded in a market with very few women, with no women. So that's how I, you know, got that experience, and it proved, you know, it helped me get my position with Walker, which was a huge step up in salary and commission and the whole package and responsibility. So that's how that happened.
Okay. This is pretty funny, but there's a question. What type of lubricant is used when bending SS pipe? Do you even know?
I don't know. You know what? I used to know a lot about things like the back pressure of our Dynamax performance mufflers and whatever the insides of the catalytic converters were, which is, a very poor, I used to know all that stuff, but I can't remember. But Steve and I had talked about this, yes, it was hard being a woman in a male-dominated industry. In some ways, especially when I went to Walker, it was an advantage. And Steve talks about, his new book is Uncopyable. Well, I definitely had an uncopyable advantage walking into a distributor or a muffler shop because they had never seen a woman. So from that standpoint, I could always get in the door.
They had never seen a woman.
They'd never seen a woman. Never seen a woman like me. Never seen a woman calling on them. So that was a big advantage. But yes, it was tough. I see that Molly's saying that it must be really tough. One of the things that was tough is that my customers assumed that I didn't know what I was talking about and assumed I was, a prissy woman that wouldn't want to get her hands dirty. And there were, products that needed to be handled and, some of the dirty work, a lot of returns and working in warehouses and stuff. So that was an, interesting aspect of the job.
I remember you learned how to weld.
Yes, I learned how to weld. And that was my own idea because I thought, people assume I don't know what I'm talking about. Well, guess what? They were right at first. I didn't. I mean, I certainly never, been underneath a car. So I went to one of my customers and I said, will you teach me how to install an exhaust system? And they said, you bet. I said, I want to learn how it's put together. I want to learn how you do the welding and everything. So so we set up a time, and I went in, and I had the car hoisted up, and they gave me all this, clothing that was fire retardant and everything, and of course, a welding mask. And they helped me put this exhaust system together and weld it. So I actually, got a lot of credibility from doing that. Well, there's kind of a funny part of that story because I don't know if many of you are old enough to remember the movie Flashdance, but that was really popular right before this. And in the opening scene of Flashdance, they pan in on somebody who's welding, and you assume it's a guy because, you don't see very, very many women welders. And as you get close, this welder turns off her welding torch and takes her welding mask off, and it turns out it's Jennifer Beals, who is and was gorgeous, gorgeous. And she shakes her head, and she has this long, flowing mane of curly hair. So I kind of had that in my mind as I was welding. And the thing I didn't realize, though, is welding is really hot. You're, like, super overdressed, and you're dealing with, like, fire. So when I was done welding, I took my welding mask off, pulled it off, and I saw all the guys were kind of, like, staring at me, and I'm thinking, maybe I look like Jennifer Beals. And then I looked in a mirror, and I definitely did not look like Jennifer Beals. My hair was like to the side of my head, and mascara is dripping down my cheeks, covered in a sweat. So it was very funny because I was definitely not Jennifer Beals, but I did learn to weld.
Yeah, and you learned to weld, and I remember that because then that actually that went a long way towards the credibility for you with the guys, so to speak.
Yes.
With the guys. And you had said that there were, and I remember that you did not want to just accept, I don't know what the word is, but you know how they would sometimes be kind of condescending to you in the beginning, and kind of treat you like a woman, like you were not, capable of stuff, was there? Did you do anything else that kind of set the tone? Because I know I remember you always would say, "Look, I just want to be treated the same way."
Yes. Yeah. Well, back in the day, we used to, if a rep sold the Walker line into a distributor that carried a different line, we would go in and change out all the products because, they couldn't be pulling things off the shelf that, oh, this part has this number, but the one next to it has a different part number. So to make things simple, they would bring in all the sales reps, and they'd give us teams of manpower guys, just day laborers, and we would drive around in rented rider trucks. And I remember we were in Evansville, Indiana, and this was my first changeover. And so we had this big crew of rider trucks, and they were, getting the teams all laid up. Each rep would have some manpower guys. And I remember it was slightly snowing, and they said, well, of course, Kay, we'll put her with a different rep because she can't drive a truck. And I said, what do you mean I can't drive a truck? And they had a few women that were sales reps, but none of them had ever driven a truck. And these were, I'm not sure what the size, but pretty big trucks. And they're 5-speed, and they had the air brakes and all that. So I remember a couple of the guys out in the parking lot at the hotel teaching me how to drive this truck so that I could have my own crew. So I really did work hard to prove myself and be accepted. And that's huge. I think of, I don't know, when you talk about going to travel and like French people are supposedly really unfriendly. But you know what? If you go in and try to speak French and speak their language and put yourself out there, they're very, very friendly. And I feel like the things that I did, that I didn't have to do necessarily, but I really did, made a big difference in how my customers and how my fellow territory reps accepted me. I mean, they really were, for the most part, very good to me, but I think that I earned their, respect.
Well, and so that kind of leads me to my my next question, which is, to get into discussing, the actual sales part of it, not just being a woman, but actually the sales part of it, was that you inherited a number of existing customers who clearly had been used to working with a man. So besides showing them that, okay, I kind of know how to weld, I kind of know how to bend pipe, and I can drive a truck. What else did you do to establish your relationship with the people who were already customers?
Well, I don't know if I'd say I lucked out there, but the rep I replaced wasn't very good. I'll just say that. The customers were not that happy with him because he didn't work hard and he wasn't very reliable. So I had a real opportunity to, show them how different I could be. So I did make a real point of building trust. So, I worked very hard to know the product and to learn, all the product numbers and the different specs on the mufflers. But I also really worked to build their trust by doing what I say would, I did what I said I would do. And that seems so cliche and so obvious, but really I think a lot of salespeople overlook that. Or we're just not organized to do it, and I really had to work hard to say, okay, if I am going to call, I'll call you at this time, and I would always make sure I called them before or at that time. I didn't, salespeople to make the sale will tend to over-exaggerate. Oh yeah, we can get that, product by April 15th or whatever. I always worked on under-promising and over-delivering. So, to be, realistic of what I could promise. And also, if things went wrong, which inevitably they did, anytime you're selling a product or service you don't have 100% control over, I always was very upfront with, okay, this happened and this is what I'm going to work on doing. So a lot of it just seems like common sense what any salesperson should do, but I really found that it made me stand out in building trust with them.
Right, and you notice there are some comments down below already coming in from people who are restating what you're talking about. And I think it was our buddy Brian Tracy, who said one time that if you're brilliant at the basics, he said that the most successful people are brilliant at the basics. And so building trust isn't just doing what you say you're going to do, but it's doing it when you say you're going to do it and doing it right the first time. But also I think the idea of honesty, like when you say honesty, because I still remember, and they shall go nameless, Dennis, that was, he'd say yes to everything. I mean, he'd tell them, yeah, we can do that, and you often would come home and say, why did he do that? Why did he say that, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So,
and one more thing too that built trust, that I think it also helps take away the fear of not knowing the answers, is that I always told my customers, I might not know the answer, but I will find out for you. And so then that took the pressure off of me to think I had to know everything, because, I didn't, and you can't. But as long as you promise them, okay, if I don't know the answer, I will find it for you and get back to you.
And I think that's really important. That's a really important thing to say. And I'm going to ask you, as my smoking hot wife, if I'm being sexist here with this statement, but it seems to me like men typically they see that as a weakness to say that they don't know. And women don't necessarily see that as a weakness. Am I being?
Yeah, you're being very sexist, but
okay.
No. But I think that could be true. Like I said, I did notice that, the guys would want to look more knowledgeable maybe, and they would answer even if they didn't know what the answer was. So I don't know. I mean, I don't know if that is a gender thing, but could possibly be.
But I'm kind of putting the guys down for saying that.
There are great guys that don't do that. So I think it's really a personality thing.
Yeah. Okay. All right. I'll agree with that. The one thing that I am always astonished with about you in all of your sales, whether you were there and then you finally went on to a different sales job later on we might get into, but was your cold calling ability, was going out there and finding new customers. Now, personally, I hate cold calling. I think anybody who likes cold calling is a very sick person. And yet, I would watch you at Walker, and later on at the Mirror. Cold calling was fine for you. So okay, so let's talk about filling that funnel, and let's talk about the cold calling part for salespeople. What is it about cold calling? From your perspective. I mean, what obviously you probably need to do it. But how do you approach it to where you're so good at it? Because you're probably the best I've ever seen.
Wow, that's a good compliment. Well, I think working in the businesses I did, paved the way. Those were the scariest cold calls ever. When those first, Amrock, I'd be out in eastern Washington in hot and dusty town or something, the town of Twist. There's a town in Washington called Twist. And, I'd have to walk in as, an unexpected person, and it was really scary. So number one, I had to just make myself do it even though it was scary. But there was a process. And so and Steve and I talked about this a little bit, I would break it down into saying, okay, what's the first thing I have to do? Well, the first thing I have to do is decide who to call on. The second thing I have to do is to drive into their parking lot. And the third thing I need to do is go up to the door. And there's a time, which Steve and I laugh about, that I drove into the parking lot and I saw all these guys staring at me and they knew I was out of place, or, you know, maybe I just took that on myself, but I was out of place, and I just turned around and acted like I was just turning around, and I left. So, you know, it was scary. It was scary. And so I just have to break it down into steps. Okay, I'm going to do this next. I'm going to go into the store or the muffler shop or the distributor. And then also,
hey, hold on for just a second. We're getting a message that they lost audio. I want to ask everybody, can you hear us okay? If you can, raise your hand. Okay, so people are saying they can hear.
Okay.
All right. I guess it's
okay, great. Okay.
One person. So I'm sorry to interrupt. Thank you, everybody.
That's all right.
Thank you very much.
I totally lost my train of thought. I've got to end the webinar now.
Okay. So, well, we were talking about, you know, the different steps that you were taking to go in, you know, to get yourself to go in.
Yeah.
And
so if I broke it down into each step, and like I said, I didn't always even get to all the steps, but every time you do something that's scary, you know, and you don't die, it makes it a little bit easier the next time. So, you know, the first time I went into that parking lot and I turned around and I was really mad at myself, but I went back again and I went in. And the other thing that has helped me with cold calling is, instead of thinking, oh my gosh, what am I going to say? I have to have my spiel ready. I have to have my elevator speech. It's really much easier, and I'm much more welcomed if I ask questions. You know, they're like, what are you selling? Well, I'm not selling anything right now because I don't know anything about you. So, you know.
Yeah, like there's a question, you know, down below of what do you do when you're talking to somebody who is disinterested?
Well, I mean, a variety of things. You know, sometimes the answer is no. Sometimes you've got a prospect that just really isn't, you know, if they're not interested. A bigger question is, do they not have the money, or are you not talking to the decision maker? So sometimes, you know, you can't sell every single person, and I believe sales is a numbers game. So, you know, you do your best. I mean, I would usually talk about, you know, can you tell me a little bit about your business? And then say, can I come back at a time where we have a little more time? And, you know, whether or not they're interested, pretty much everyone is interested in talking about their business. And even as you get down the line, I always got to know my customers really well. I knew their families. I knew stories about their kids, you know, and so it wasn't always about, are you interested in what I'm selling? You know, are you interested in having a conversation? And then we can decide if, you know, would this be a good product for you? So that's how I would approach that.
Mm-hmm. And how did you deal with rejection, though?
Very badly. Tears, no. That is really tough because you have to remind yourself that sales is a numbers game. But as a true salesperson, you know, I feel a little adrenaline rush when I make a sale. I mean, sometimes a big adrenaline rush. I love it. I love hearing, anytime I hear yes is great, and hearing no is no fun. And, you know, you can think of it as, okay, I have to have X number of no's to get to yes, and what's your closing rate, and you can do all of that, you know, to help yourself. But the bottom line is, it doesn't feel good to say no. So you just have to accept that as part of the process. And you know what? Sometimes it's a bummer. I even do things like listening to, you know, tapes or CDs or MP3s or whatever. I'm doing that now on series to, yeah, Steve Miller has an excellent, to keep myself in a positive mindset, because that's the hardest part about sales.
Now, wait, you see, and if you remember, our our old buddy Mark Victor Hansen.
Yeah.
People might, you know how he always talked about rejection. He always said, I want to hear no as fast as possible. He said, because then I would say next.
Right.
And I think that I think too many salespeople will often they don't allow the customer to say no completely. They just kind of come up with this wishy-washy reason to keep the conversation going, right?
Right.
And because they don't want to be rejected when it's
and maybe really is the worst word to hear in sales. No is better to hear, so you can move on to someone who might say yes. So there will be a lot of people who don't want to say no, and they'll try to be nice and say, oh, call me in 2 months or do this or that. And you have to weigh in your mind, is this really worth my time? Because you might be able to find in that time somebody who's a much better fit and who can become a much better customer.
Now, when and I'm going to talk about the mirror since we're really just talking about sales now.
Mm-hmm.
You left Walker to start a family with somebody, and we had
the world's best dad.
We had Kelly, and so for a number of years you helped me build my business from basically nothing, and then later on when Kelly finally graduated from college and went out and got a job, or while she was in college, you decided to leave me and or leave the business and
Mm-hmm.
go get a job and go find a job. Now, the job you got, quite frankly, was a crap job. But what I mean by that is that you accepted a job selling a local newspaper, and the territory that you took was a failing territory.
Correct. Failing territory in a declining industry.
In a declining industry.
Not everything I do is smart.
I mean, that was a hell of a challenge, and yet you ended up turning that territory around completely.
Yeah.
So, what did you do?
Well, I was able to use a lot of the skills that I've made in my, that I developed through my earlier sales position. I'd say, again, this territory had been just not taken care of very well. So just going back to those basic principles of, coming in and saying, I will take care of you. I want to learn about your business. I want to learn what works for you. That was huge. Another thing that I did, and I did this back with my other sales too, is I didn't sell them everything under the sun. When you have a product line or when you have advertising, we have so many different products and special sections and everything. And you know what? If you just try to sell them everything, then you have no credibility. So when the things that I did not think were right for them, not only would I not sell them, but I would tell them about them and say, I'm not going to sell this to you. So that really helped with my existing customers. I also went out and did cold calling, and that was huge because I found some really, really good customers who were a good fit for newspaper advertising. And there aren't a lot of them that I found for our paper, but I found some, like this nonprofit chain, and it became a huge account. I became very tight with them, friends and valued confidant, whatever, advisor. So that helped to grow that account. Again, my cold calling, now to walk into a small business is not scary for me anymore. It just isn't. I've done so many harder things than that. And, when your comfort zone expands, it's always expanded for the most part. So I did a good job of cold calling and opening new accounts for the paper. So besides, the combination of getting new accounts and really building and solidifying the ones that I already had, I grew the territory tremendously, and it became very profitable.
And there's a little discussion going on in the chat right now about if you see if you approach somewhere and it says no soliciting in the window, how would you handle that?
Oh, I do that all the time. I go in and I say, okay, I'm a solicitor. Do I need to leave? And they hardly ever say yes. I joke around with people, I'm like the queen of puns and being funny and, very lighthearted. So if someone says no soliciting, I always go in and say, I'm a solicitor. So I'm just going to be really upfront. I don't think I've ever had anyone say, get out. So ignore.
I love that advice. I don't think I ever heard you say that before.
Oh, yeah.
I think that's great advice. So, in sales, that there are a lot of books about sales. There's a lot of techniques taught about sales. And are there any things that you don't like? Any techniques that are taught that you don't like and that you would not do?
Yes, there definitely are. And when back early on, we had sales clinics through Amrock and Walker, and there were some things that I just thought, you're trying to trick someone. When you call and say, yeah, I'd like an appointment, would Tuesday or Thursday be better? As if the person wouldn't be able to think about saying no. There's no answer. There's no, you can't say no to that. Well, it's ridiculous. Of course, they can say no. And, you want this in green or blue as a close. I just don't like trying to trick people. And if you're making sales for one time only, it might possibly work. But I've always been in ongoing relationship sales, and that does not work in the long term. You can never trick someone into giving you the right answer. So
right.
That's something that they used to teach, and I just hated it, and I never did it.
Yeah, or somebody would say, are you, what are you selling? And you, I'm not trying to sell you anything. I just I just want to introduce myself to you, or something like that, and we know, what eventually, no, of course, the objective here is you're eventually going to try to sell us something. Here's a question.
But, sometimes not. Sometimes really you find someone that doesn't need your product, so the answer, like I say it depends, on what, I can't answer that until I get to know you.
Well, okay. Here's a question, because you're actually doing this now, since you're now back working with me, it says, what can you recommend to cold calling via telephone?
Well, that is a tough one. It's really hard to get through to people, to cold call on the telephone. So, what we do and what I really recommend is getting them to raise their hand and respond in some way before you call them. I just think it's, I don't think you can call someone up and give them your pitch. I just really think that is, unless you have a name or a reason or something really compelling to call someone up and a connection, I wouldn't recommend that.
Yeah, and you and I have both found that it's really hard to just pick up, to call somewhere and to say, like, for example, because, I do a lot of speaking. So you might call somewhere, whether it's a corporation or whether it's a trade association or something, and, what we want to do is you want to say, okay, who should I be talking to who hires speakers, right?
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
But more often than not, you've got some kind of gatekeeper, and and the gatekeeper's job is to keep you out.
Mm-hmm.
So that's really hard to get through that gatekeeper on the telephone. So like you say,
mm-hmm.
you and I have developed this idea of, well, through, and not just email, but a lot of times through mail, direct mail. You know, we will, and it might be on LinkedIn, it might be some other method that we use to determine somebody's name at the company, and then we will use direct mail to contact that person, you know, directly, and just, you know, get a little bit of, you know, tell them a little bit about, you know, what we do, and then just get them and just say, hey, if this is something that you might be interested in looking at, you know, please respond, you know, please, you know, we used to say, please fax us this you know, this sheet, and or go to this link, or email me, or something like that. But like you say, it's getting them to just raise their hand, and then once they raise their hand, yep, then we go. You know.
Right. And if you find the right prospect, somebody that you really know is somebody you want to talk to, you can do some work beforehand. And what was the name of the guy that you wanted to speak at one of your meetings that nobody could get a hold of? And I made a card. We use a system called Send Out Cards, and I used a wanted poster, and I found his picture online somewhere, you could do, and put his picture in this poster and said wanted, and I said, I want to talk to you. And he called me. So
yeah, I remember that really well, because he was a very big time, you know, business guy in St. Louis, and very busy guy, rich guy, you know, big, top of the business chain down there, and I remember we could not get to him. You know, we couldn't get past the gatekeepers, and so you created that that wanted card, you know, wanted with his picture in it. And I still remember that you mailed it out, and I think it was within like 3 or 4 days that he responded, and he said, yeah, okay, I can do that. And it was amazing. You know, like here, you know, Joshua was saying, you know, if he makes an appointment with a company, he looks up surrounding companies on Google Maps, calls them, tells them he'll be in the area, and just says, you know, I'd like to drop by. So, you know, it's kind of a numbers game, kind of a cold calling thing, saying, well, I'm going to be there, and if it's okay for me to just drop by and say hello, meet you, introduce myself, or something like that. I think the word we're looking for here is to be non-threatening.
Yeah.
And when people think that you're coming in to just pitch them, no, that's uncomfortable. You know, they don't want to be pitched. You know, nobody loves to be sold to. People love to buy, but nobody wants to be sold to. Now,
yeah, I have more thoughts on that, because it depends on the geography. If you have any chance to go in, I was thinking about just calling someone across the country like we do. But another way you can do it, which I've done, is go into the office without an appointment and just drop your card with that person and said, could you please, you know, give this card to so-and-so. And then when you call them, you can say, you know, I'm following, because you probably leave a voicemail, I'm following up, I dropped my card by. So then they know that you made that effort. That has helped a lot, too, in a bigger company.
And Carl is, you know, he's actually, you know, I didn't say this, not only with the greeting cards. Greeting cards are awesome. People always open up greeting cards. But they also open up what we call fat mail.
Mm-hmm.
We have used fat mail. We still use fat mail. We're going to keep doing fat mail. But Carl gives a great example here where he says he used to mail a large envelope to his prospect, and inside the envelope would be a kid's sneaker, and his opening line was, sorry for the inconvenience, I'm just trying to get my foot in the door.
Yeah, that's great.
A K, that would be a K mailing.
Yeah, I love it. I love it. I do love that, and that's something.
So, you know, now we're kind of getting towards the end of this thing too, but you know, we've been talking about sales, but we haven't been talking about the person behind the sales. You know, that we all have. You know, we still have to personally be able to handle something like sales. You know what? And everybody has challenges. You know, what are the challenges that you feel you've had to overcome or handle or something to be that successful salesperson that you are?
Well, one is to be organized because I'm not a naturally organized person. And, you know, following through on what you say you're going to do is really dependent on being organized. And back in the day, I had my day timer, and I was meticulous about, you know, putting in appointments and, you know, all the things I wanted to do. You know, now everything's digital, and we've got all these systems to remind us. But, you know, you got to be organized. And a lot of times salespeople, I'll make that generalization. I don't think salespeople are actually naturally organized. We like to go in for the kill and move on and not, you know, finish up what we started. And that is totally me. So that is one of them. And then the other one really is just to remind myself to ask for the sale. Sometimes I just get so wrapped up. I mean, I'm very people-oriented. I love to talk to people and find out about them. And sometimes I have to remember, okay, you got to ask for the sale. You have to say, okay, here's what I recommend. Should I, you know, write that up? Does that sound good? Is that what we're going with? So, you know, never forget to actually ask for the sale. Sometimes I've been surprised, by people that I didn't think really would go for it, but they did. So don't forget to ask. So I'd say those are my two biggest ones.
Yeah. You know, when you talk about organization and that you think that a lot of salespeople aren't necessarily a lot of salespeople aren't necessarily naturally organized people because they want to sell. They want to go in, like you say, go in for the kill. And you know that I'm going to make a comment up to companies now, to heads of companies who have salespeople. If your salespeople are spending half their time in the office writing up reports or writing up quotes or in other words, they're doing office work, then you're losing sales. You should have support staff who does that for the sales. Because when the salespeople are, it's sort of like Southwest Airlines. You know, Herb Kelleher, a long time ago when he was CEO of Southwest Airlines, he realized that his airplanes only made him money when they were in the air. When they were sitting on the ground, they were not making any money. And so he figured out a way to turn the flights very, very quickly so that they would get into the air. And that's, you know, and that's something that I often tell companies is get your salespeople, keep them in the air. Let them be selling. Hire somebody else to do that, to do that other stuff, because it's a waste of salespeople's time. You know, I've had that conversation many times. Let's see. Okay, whoops, we're getting a couple of other questions here. I want to make sure that I'm. Okay, I'm assuming you worked on commission, and it was salary plus commission, but for in your last job,
all of my jobs, yeah.
Yeah, and your last job with the Mirror was primarily was commission. Did you find yourself changing strategy? I think that changing strategy, or does this not apply, or how did you find your leads? Did you find? I
can't read all of that question.
Yeah.
The question disappeared.
Oh, I'm sorry. There it is.
Can you see the whole question?
Well, did you find cold calling work better in one position or another, or I'm not completely clear on what the question is.
Okay. Did you find cold calling worked? Well, every sales position has depended on finding new business. Now, for one reason or the other, because, if you want to grow your territory, I'd say cold calling is, did it work better? When I was with Walker, I remember I opened up a huge warehouse that, was, primarily, did I show my picture?
Oh yeah, pull your picture up of winning your award.
That I won the Salesperson of the Year.
Yeah.
Here's me and my trophy. Can you see it?
Yeah, that's perfect. There's you. And look how young you are.
I know. That's just a baby. With all those pipes, that backdrop is really hard. So I think cold calling was different for each position. but it was very important for, all of my jobs. So with the automotive, I opened a new warehouse, which I, just walked in. I don't remember exactly how that all started, but also I had to help pull the product through to their customers. So there was a lot of cold calling there. So that was very important because, they had the distributors had a lot of lines they were pushing, and so I needed to pull my line through and help the guys, be excited and get that out there. So, of course, with the newspaper, we had a lot of churning, and customers would come and go, so I had to really be always adding accounts. So that's the answer to that.
Now, I know that back when you were with Walker, that was kind of, before the internet had all the information it does now, but I know when you were with the Mirror, the question is, how important is it to know your prospect before your meeting? How do you respond to that?
Oh, yeah, it's very important. And, I sold, to some real, just mom and pop businesses that I could just go in and just start talking to them. But then I had one, my biggest account was called Valley City's Mental Health Counseling, and they are a nonprofit that do really, really great work in Seattle and the whole South area. And yeah, I got to know them very well. I studied their, annual reports, and I went to their fundraisers, and, he and I developed a relationship. But yeah, before I worked with that account, I learned a lot about them. So, it depends, but for the most part, yes, you definitely need to know what you can about them beforehand. Sometimes it's obvious if you're going into a Chinese restaurant, but sometimes it's not. So,
exactly. It depends on, there might not be a lot of information available out there. Did your compensation structure influence your approach, results?
I'd say, thinking about the Mirror, yes, it did. But I think it's a win-win because obviously I wanted to make more money in commission, but that meant finding the right prospect that would do repeat advertising and would benefit from it, and it would, be a long-term contract. So finding the one-offs and the little tiny ads, those were not very effective for my customers, and they were not very effective at all for my commission. So, there were some of those. I had a lot of accounts set up that, just had ongoing ads that ran, and they were small, and they didn't take a lot of work, but they didn't bring a lot of results. But yes, I was very strategic in finding new accounts that would be better for my commission, and do more for the customer too. So I'd say yes.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so like I say, we're getting down to the end, and what advice, what tips, what have we not talked about? Whether it's regarding women in a male-dominated industry, whether it's sales, cold calling, relationship building, what have we not talked about that you would like to share?
Well, I think we have talked about it, but again, it's a kind of cliche, but people do business with people. When I left my sales positions, even with the Mirror, I got cards from my customers saying, we are really going to miss you. And it's all about the people. It doesn't matter if you're selling advertising or tools or clothing or whatever. You're doing business with people, and if you build a relationship where they trust you and they like you, and like I said, being liked is a lot about being interested in them. I still remember stories from 30 years ago about people's kids that they told me that were hilarious. And so I think that just focusing on those relationships, working hard, building trust, those are really the keys to sales.
Mm-hmm. Okay, well, I don't see any other questions right now. What I'm going to do this. I'm going to move us back over here. I'm going to bring this back up because just in case somebody wants to ask Kay Miller a question, I know that, and also be able to contact Jean. But if somebody has a question about sales, feel free to email my smoking hot wife, Kay, right there at her email address. Okay? No job offers. Right? In fact, I might have to have that go through, change that
filter,
and have that.
Yeah, I know, really.
It's to you, so.
Steve, you can just set up a filter on her email. Anything that says jobs,
It says job.
comes to you.
Exactly right. So, but, thanks, to Muffler Mamla. I am a professional. I've for years and years, I have said that Kay is one of the best salespeople I've ever known. I've been very lucky to know some really great salespeople. My buddy Kelly McCann, our buddy Kelly McCann, and my smoking hot wife Kay. Amazing salespeople, really know what they're doing. I'm lucky to have her back in the office. After she left me, finally got her to come back with the launch of the new book and stuff. So appreciate that very much. Thank you, babe. And I think it was a great interview. Jean?
Yeah, I want to say one more thing, though.
Hey, one more thing.
Steve has been a super supportive husband. So I want to give him props for that because he totally supported me going out and getting these kind of weird jobs and even helped me with marketing back in the day. He would help me with flyers, and I did some extra things for my distributors and helped them promote products through. And you've always been there and super, super supportive and a cheerleader. So that is really pretty darn cool.
I know why we're married. So.
Yeah. So anyway, I appreciate everybody.
You look like you're cold. You're all wrapped up now as we wrap this thing up.
It's cold in our office.
So thank you everybody for joining us. We had a huge registration for this, and a lot of people were here online. Thank you very much for joining us. As always, this is recorded, going to be archived. It'll be up for you guys to be able to watch again and again, over and over again. Be sure to share with everybody. Hey, thanks, Bob. Nice to see you. And as always, Steve Miller, better known as Kelly's dad, and Smoking Hot Kay's husband. Always remember, be uncopyable. We'll see you back again next month on IMTS webinars. Bye, everybody.
Bye.
Bye.